The wooden dojo creaked softly as the wind pushed through gaps in its ancient walls. Dust drifted lazily in the shafts of morning light, swirling like quiet ghosts of the warriors who once trained here. The air smelled of old tatami, dry cedar, and a faint memory of incense long burned away. And there, in the center of the room, lay a katana, cracked clean through the middle. Not broken from battle, broken from neglect. Its blade had lost its shine. Its grip had faded. Its edge, once sharp enough to cut silence itself, now lay split open like a wound that had never healed. The katana did not break suddenly. It broke slowly, quietly, after years of being untouched. Metal, like the spirit, decays when no longer tested. And perhaps that is why the blade now rested in pieces, because it no longer remembered the hands that once wielded it, the discipline that once shaped it, the purpose that once defined it. Footsteps echoed softly on the wooden floor. Slow, deliberate, controlled. The kind of walk belonging to someone who carried old burdens in his chest. Someone who had spent too long pretending everything was fine. Someone who had forgotten who he used to be. He approached the broken katana and stopped. The dust drifted between him and the blade, making the room feel suspended between worlds, between what he was and what he feared he was becoming. He knelt. His fingers hovered above the cracked steel. He didn't touch it yet. Touching it meant acknowledging what it represented. Touching it meant confronting the truth he had spent years avoiding. A cracked katana is not just a failed weapon. It is a mirror. The blade reflected the truth he resisted. He, too, had become divided. Not by force, by neglect. There had been a time when he lived with complete clarity, when his mornings began before sunrise, when his breath was steady, his mind sharp, his spirit anchored in something deeper than comfort. But life had shifted. Success had dulled him. Comfort had softened him. Chaos had made him reactive instead of deliberate. And somewhere along the path, small cracks formed, imperceptible at first. He stopped training regularly. Then he stopped rising early. Then he stopped controlling his reactions. Then he stopped listening to the voice inside that used to be unshakable. And in the same slow, quiet process, the blade cracked. He finally touched the katana. The moment his fingers made contact, a memory rushed back. Years ago, the first day he stepped into this dojo, trembling with fear yet overflowing with determination. He remembered the vow he made then, not to the master, not to the school, but to himself. I will never let my spirit go dull. But he had. He closed his eyes and allowed the weight of that truth to settle in his chest. A cracked sword cannot be repaired by excuses. And a cracked spirit cannot be mended by half-promises or bursts of temporary motivation. Dust swirled around him again, illuminated by sunlight like drifting embers. The silence of the dojo was heavy but sacred. It was a kind of silence that didn't judge, only revealed. He picked up the two pieces of the blade. The crack was clean, the steel brittle, the fracture almost symbolic, perfectly straight, like reality itself had snapped the sword with precision. He whispered to himself, though no one was there to hear, "This is who I became." Not dramatic, not catastrophic, just weakened, divided, split between who he was and who he settled for being. He stood, holding the broken blade in both hands. Dust floated around him again, and for the first time in years, he didn't flinch at the silence. He embraced it. He walked toward the shrine at the front of the dojo, a simple wooden shelf with a candle, a scroll of calligraphy, and a small iron hammer resting beside a stone. The master once told him, when a warrior breaks, he must not hide the pieces. He must bring them into the light. He placed the cracked katana before the candle. The flame flickered, illuminating the fractured line as if inspecting it. The master used to say that a cracked sword cannot lie. It tells the truth about its owner. And the truth was clear. He had lost discipline. He had lost direction. He had lost himself. But as he stared at the broken blade, something unexpected stirred inside him. Not shame, not defeat, but a quiet, powerful resolve. A feeling that had slept beneath the dust of his heart. A sensation so familiar it almost hurt to feel it again. Purpose. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. The broken katana was not a punishment. It was a reminder that strength is not something you once had. It is something you must choose every single day. He exhaled slowly, letting the air expand inside his chest like a declaration. And for the first time in a long time, he felt the stirring of the man he used to be, the one who didn't negotiate with weakness, didn't run from discomfort, didn't fear the path of discipline. His fingers curled around the cracked handle. A broken blade can be reforged. A broken man can be rebuilt, but only if he walks back into the fire. He knelt again, bowed his head deeply toward the cracked steel, and allowed the silence to carve its message into him. You may be broken, but you are not finished. Dust drifted once more, swirling like spirits rising. The dojo seemed to breathe with him. And slowly, he stood, holding not a weapon, but a promise. He remained standing in front of the shrine, staring at the cracked blade, as if the metal itself was waiting for him to speak. The morning light shifted, slowly crawling up the walls, warming the old wood and revealing details he hadn't noticed in years. Small cuts and pillars from training sessions long forgotten, faint footprints etched into the floor, an old crack in the left beam that had been there since his first month here. The dojo hadn't changed. He remembered the master's voice, calm, firm, impossibly steady. The sword breaks only after the spirit breaks first. At the time, he thought it was symbolic. Now he realized it had been a warning, one he ignored. He closed his eyes and took a breath deeper than any he had taken in months. And for the first time since returning to this place, he didn't feel like a visitor. He felt like a man arriving at the beginning of a long-delayed journey. He walked to the center of the dojo floor, where the dust still drifted gently. The air was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with potential, unlived days, unkept promises, untapped strength. He placed the broken katana pieces on a folded cloth, as he had once seen the master do with damaged weapons. He remembered that day vividly. A young trainee had broken his wooden practice sword during sparring. The boy cried, embarrassed and angry, frustrated at his weakness. The master had picked up the broken pieces gently, placed them on a cloth, and said, "A weapon breaks to teach you the weakness you ignored." The boy asked, "Then what should I do?" "Become someone strong enough to wield something unbreakable." He never understood that lesson, until now. He lifted the cracked sword again. The fracture line was almost beautiful, jagged yet precise. It told a story of erosion, not catastrophe. The steel did not snap in battle. It snapped in silence. He whispered into the emptiness, "I let myself drift." The dojo swallowed his words, not accusingly, but with the acceptance of a teacher who had always known this day would come. He moved to the edge of a room where the training staves stood, thin wooden sticks worn smooth from decades of hands gripping them. He selected one, ran his fingers over it, and felt the familiarity return like blood flowing back into a limb that had long been numb. He took his first stance in months. Feet grounded, back straight, shoulders relaxed, eyes soft but focused. A simple position, yet it carried the weight of his entire life. He raised a wooden staff. The movement felt heavy, not physically, but spiritually, as if the weight of every undisciplined day was resisting him. His muscles complained. His breath stuttered. His balance wavered. But he didn't stop. The first strike was sloppy. The second was shaky. The third landed with a dull, hollow sound. He continued anyway. Strike after strike, breath after breath. Dust floated with each swing, swirling like smoke around him. His arms ached. His grip weakened. His legs trembled from a foundation that had grown soft from comfort. But something inside him refused to let go. The master used to say, "Strength doesn't return in a moment, but intention returns in an instant." His intention had returned. He trained until sweat dripped onto the wooden floor, until his heartbeat steadied, until his mind stopped shouting excuses and began obeying commands again. The dojo absorbed every strike, every breath, every tremor of effort. When he finally paused, he looked down. Dust had gathered at his feet from the violent movements of practice. He smiled, not because he felt strong, but because he felt honest. He returned to the shrine and knelt again. The cracked katana lay before him, illuminated by the soft morning fire of the candle. He lifted one half of the blade and studied the edge. A broken sword is not useless. It is a blueprint. If reforged correctly, it becomes stronger than before. He rose and walked to the small forge room at the back of the dojo. The master had used this room to sharpen swords, repair armor, and, on rare occasions, rebuild blades. The forge hadn't been used in years, but the tools remained neatly arranged as if waiting for this moment. He placed the cracked blade on the anvil. The handle looked old, worn, but determined, much like he felt. He lit the small charcoal pit, fed it slow burning with shavings, and watched the flame grow with patience he had forgotten he possessed. The fire reflected in the cracked steel, giving it a fleeting sense of life again. He heated the blade gently, carefully. The metal glowed faintly, like a memory returning. He didn't know if he could fix it properly. He didn't know if he had the skill. But he knew one thing. He had to try. He lifted the small hammer, its grip polished from a master's hands. The weight felt heavy with history and expectation. He lifted it slowly and brought it down with a controlled tap. The sound echoed differently than he remembered. It wasn't the sharp ring of steel. It was deeper, more tired, but willing. Tap, tap, tap. Each strike whispered the truth. This won't be easy. This won't be fast. This won't be perfect. But it will be done. He worked for hours, carefully aligning the crack, warming the metal, coaxing it back into shape. Sweat dripped onto the anvil. Smoke curled around him. Dust mixed with steam in the air. Time no longer mattered. He wasn't reforging a sword. He was reforging himself. When he finally stepped back, exhausted, the blade lay before him, still scarred, still imperfect, but whole again. A faint line remained where the crack had once been, but he didn't try to hide it. He let it remain as a reminder. True strength is not flawless. It is strengthened at a fracture. He lifted the katana reverently. It felt familiar again, but heavier with meaning. The dojo seemed to breathe with him once more, no longer ancient and abandoned, but alive, participating in his rebirth. He sheathed the reforged blade into an old scabbard and stood in the center of the room once again. The dust drifted in the air, catching the sunlight in a warm golden haze. He inhaled deeply. This was no longer the man who walked into the dojo that morning. This was a man reborn through effort, honesty, and acceptance of his own fractures. He stepped forward, steady and sure. The path ahead would be long. Discipline would be tested. Weakness would return. Doubt would whisper. But now he knew the truth. A cracked katana is not the end of a warrior. It is the beginning of one. He bowed to the empty dojo, not out of ritual, but out of gratitude. Then he whispered, "I am ready to walk the path again." He turned toward the door as the dust settled behind him, and the reforged blade at his side gleamed with a new, imperfect, unbreakable purpose.